They fined him $250 for fishing in his own neighborhood, so he bought the entire lake. Marlon Tate wasn't the kind of man people noticed at first. He didn't talk much unless he had something worth saying. Lived in a modest but well-kept two-story home in the heart of Plano, Texas. You know the type: fresh-cut lawn, 2 bikes leaned against the garage, and a welcome mat that had faded letters but still meant what it said. Married, 2 kids, worked as a civil engineer at a firm about 30 minutes out. Didn't bother nobody. It was a Saturday afternoon, sky clear, air warm but not boiling. Marlon had just finished cutting the grass. His wife, Desiree, was inside helping their daughter with a school project, while their teenage son was glued to a gaming headset upstairs. Marlon grabbed his fishing pole from the garage, slung a little tackle box under one arm, and decided to walk down to the neighborhood lake, something he hadn't done in months. This lake sat right in the center of the subdivision, big, calm, pretty even, surrounded by paved trails and manicured hedges. Kids fed ducks there. People jogged around it. A few folks even set up little birthday parties under the gazebo on Sundays. Marlon walked past all that, nodding at a couple of familiar faces. Nobody waved back. He found his usual spot, a quiet bend on the far side, near the edge where the willows dipped low. He baited his hook, cast his line, and exhaled for what felt like the first real time all week. 15 minutes later, a white man in a golf cart with an orange safety vest rolled up. The HOA patrol guy, clipboard in hand, smug little smirk, like he just caught a shoplifter. "Sir," he said, not bothering with hello, "are you a resident of this community?" Marlon squinted up at him. "Yeah, live on Birchwood Lane." "Do you have permission to fish here?" "Permission? I didn't know I needed any. I live here." The man scribbled something. "Fishing is prohibited in common areas unless authorized by the HOA. Marlon looked around. No signs, no rope, no other fishermen being approached. Just him, standing there in a faded Dallas Mavericks tee, rod in hand. "Is that a new rule?" he asked. "It's always been the rule. You'll be receiving a citation in the mail." Just like that, the man turned his cart around and drove off, leaving Marlon standing there with a bobber barely moving in the water. The citation showed up 3 days later, a $250 fine. Unauthorized use of HOA common property. But what really set things off wasn't the fine, it was what started happening right after. It's funny how quiet neighborhoods can make the loudest noise. By the end of the week, Marlon noticed something different. People he used to wave to while walking his dog now looked the other way. Conversations stopped when he walked by. A woman who always complimented his wife's roses crossed the street instead of walking past their yard. Desiree noticed it too. She was putting groceries away when she brought it up. "You talked to Mrs. Galloway today? She usually chats my ear off about her grandkids, but today she just mumbled and left." Marlon didn't answer right away. He just unfolded the fine again and stared at it on the counter. It still didn't sit right. "Let me guess," she added. "This has something to do with that HOA clown." He nodded. "I don't think this was about fishing," he said. "I've seen other people out there before. I'm not stupid." The next day, he walked the trail around the lake with his phone in hand, quietly recording. 2 older white men stood on the dock with lines in the water, sipping iced tea from tumblers. A woman sat on a lawn chair reading a book, tackle box at her feet. No security vest, no clipboard, no citations, no golf cart. That night, he posted the videos to the neighborhood's private Facebook group with a simple caption, "Just wondering why this rule only applies to me?" The comments section exploded. Some folks defended the HOA, others started to ask questions. "I've fished there for years, never heard of a rule. Looks like someone's making up rules on the fly. Marlon's always been respectful. This doesn't feel right." But there were other comments too, ones that tried to dismiss it. "Don't make it about race. Rules are rules. Maybe you were aggressive?" Marlon felt something shift, not just in the community, but in himself. He was tired, not just from the fishing incident, but from the way people pretended not to see what was obvious. That week, he filed a formal dispute with the HOA. He requested documentation showing where exactly it said fishing was prohibited and when that rule had been passed. 2 weeks went by, no response. He called, left voicemails, emailed, nothing. One day, a man named Walter Kinsey, an older black resident who lived 2 streets over, stopped by as Marlon was unloading mulch in the driveway. "I saw your post," Walter said. Same thing happened to me back in '09. I was hosting a cookout by the lake for my granddaughter's birthday. Got a citation for unauthorized gathering. Same gazebo where they do yoga every Saturday now. Marlon looked up. You file a complaint? I did. They tossed it. Told me I should be more involved in the community if I wanted things to change. That's code, you know. Marlon clenched his jaw, not out of anger, but resolve. I'm not letting this go. Walter chuckled. Good. Maybe you're the one to finally shake things up. But the more Marlon pushed, the more the HOA pulled back, and that's when he started thinking bigger. It started with insomnia. Marlon would lie in bed after midnight, staring at the ceiling fan spin, his mind moving faster than the blades. The more he thought about it, the more he realized something didn't add up. This lake, this supposed common area, was always presented as part of the neighborhood. But he'd never actually seen paperwork that proved it belonged to the HOA. The trails, the playground, the pool, sure, but the lake? That seemed off. The next morning, Marlon got dressed, kissed his wife goodbye, and instead of heading straight to work, he drove to the Collin County Records office. A man at the front desk pointed him toward the property records department. Looking for who owns that lake in Oak Valley Estates, Marlon said, handing over a map he printed from Google. The clerk raised an eyebrow. You live there? Yeah. Strange. Nobody's ever asked about that property. Give me a second. He disappeared into the back. When he returned, he held a slim file in his hand, dust still on it. Well, the clerk said. Technically, that lake isn't HOA property, never was. Marlon blinked. Come again? It was part of the original development plan, but when the company folded in '07, it reverted to the bank. Changed hands a few times, then ended up owned by some holding firm out of Arizona. They probably don't even remember they own it. Marlon took a photo of the page, then another, then every document in that file. That evening, he sat at his kitchen table with Desiree and laid everything out. So the HOA has been enforcing rules on land they don't even control? She asked. Yep, which means their citation means nothing. They've got no legal right to find me for fishing there. Desiree leaned back, arms crossed. So what now? You expose them? He hesitated, then said, No, I buy it. She laughed, like belly laughed. You're serious? Dead serious. I called a real estate attorney today, left a message. If this land is technically private and nobody's managing it, maybe it's not that expensive. Desiree paused. Baby, that's a big move. I know, but they tried to embarrass me, to single me out like I didn't belong here. If I let that slide, what's next? They fine our kids for riding their bikes too loud? Tell you can't garden past 6 p.m.? She nodded slowly, watching him. You really gonna buy a whole lake out of spite? He smiled. Not spite, principle. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Vanessa Reyes, from a small firm in nearby McKinney, called back the next morning. After one look at the documents, she confirmed what Marlon already suspected. The HOA's bluffing, she said. They're overstepping their authority, and if you want to make a formal offer on that lake, I can reach out to the current owner on your behalf. 2 weeks later, it was done. Marlon bought the lake. But he didn't tell the HOA, not yet. First, he wanted to see what they'd do next. Marlon kept the paperwork tucked in a folder in his office drawer. He'd look at it now and then, not to gloat, but to remind himself he wasn't imagining things. He had done it. The lake, the same one he was fined for standing beside with a fishing pole, was now his. He owned the water they tried to keep him from. Desiree called it poetic justice. Marlon called it accountability. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for a Thursday night at the community center. Marlon hadn't attended in years, but this time he went early, took a seat in the second row, right behind the board. The president, a man named Curtis Drayton, with his pastel polo shirt and clipped tone, stood at the front like he ran a courtroom. Before we begin, Curtis said, flipping through papers, we want to address some recent concerns about lake usage. The HOA board met and agreed to install signs prohibiting fishing, swimming, and any form of recreation around the lake unless otherwise authorized. Murmurs spread through the room. A few residents looked around, confused. One woman raised her hand. Wait, when did that become a rule? We've been fishing out there since I moved here. Curtis cleared his throat. Well, in light of recent disputes, we felt it was best to clarify usage guidelines. Marlon stood up. You're not allowed to do that. Curtis blinked. Excuse me? You're not allowed to make rules about something you don't own. Curtis chuckled. Sir, if you have a concern, you can schedule time on the agenda. I don't need to be on the agenda, Marlon said, pulling a manila folder from his bag. I own the lake. As of 2 weeks ago, I legally purchased it from the title company in Arizona. The HOA has no legal authority over it, not 1 inch. Silence. Total silence. Even the guy in the back chewing gum froze. Curtis's mouth opened, then closed again. The board members turned to each other. No one said a word. Marlon handed copies of the deed to the front table. And effective immediately, I'm placing the entire lake under private management. No fishing, swimming, or events allowed unless approved through my office. Another murmur, this one louder, some gasps, a few chuckles. You can't be serious, Curtis said. I'm very serious. You fined me. You ignored my dispute. You enforced rules you had no right to make. So I bought the problem. Someone in the back laughed out loud. Curtis's face turned red. You're being vindictive. No, Marlon said. I'm being careful. The next time you think about using your power to single someone out, maybe you'll remember this night. He walked out without waiting for the next agenda item. He didn't need applause. He didn't want revenge. But now, nobody could pretend this was just about fishing. But that power shift, it sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, and not everyone took it gracefully. By the following weekend, the tone of the neighborhood had changed. Some folks cheered Marlon on from a distance. Nods became longer. A few hesitant waves turned into full-on conversations at the mailbox, but others weren't so quiet about how they felt. Anonymous flyers showed up in people's mailboxes. A lake is for everyone, not just one man. HOA rule of law must be upheld. This isn't how we solve disagreements. Marlon found one stuffed into his front door. He read it, shook his head, and tossed it in the trash without a word. Then came the emails. The HOA's general inbox flooded with residents wanting clarification. Some demanded answers. Others accused the board of acting without transparency. Curtis and the other board members released a vague statement that tried to save face. We are in communication with the new property owner regarding the future of lake access. We are working on a solution that supports unity and community wellness. But that wasn't what people wanted. They wanted to know why, for years, the board had selectively enforced rules. Why Marlon was fined while others were left alone. Why the board tried to flex on something they didn't even own. The next week, Marlon received an email from a neighbor, Amanda Colburn, asking to speak. She was a school teacher, lived 3 doors down. They had barely spoken before. They met on his front porch, each with a glass of sweet tea. I just wanted to say, Amanda started, what happened to you, it was wrong. I fish with my kids all the time. Nobody's ever said a word. Marlon nodded. I figured. I also wanted to apologize, not because I did anything, but because I didn't. I saw that patrol guy giving you the ticket. I didn't speak up. I told myself it wasn't my business. Marlon looked at her. But now it is? Amanda stared down at her cup. Yeah, now it is. It wasn't just Amanda. Walter from down the street knocked on his door the next evening. The Patel family sent over a handwritten thank you note. Even a teenager, Max, who used to skateboard near the lake, said, "Man, that was wild what you did. Respect." But while support grew from everyday folks, the HOA doubled down. Curtis scheduled an emergency board meeting. They tried to reassert control, floated the idea of suing to get access rights, hired a lawyer, sent Marlon a request for negotiation. Marlon responded through Vanessa, his attorney. Access may be granted at the owner's discretion, but there must be written acknowledgement of the HOA's overreach and a formal apology for the citation issued to my client. Curtis refused. Pride was a hard thing to swallow, especially for a man used to getting his way. So the lake stayed closed. Kids cried, people grumbled. But the message was clear. You don't get to push people around, then ask for favors. But even with ownership and power in his hands, Marlon couldn't shake the weight of what all this revealed about the people living just steps away. 2 months later, the sign still hung along the lake's edge. Private property, no access without written permission. And for 2 months, the HOA didn't back down. Curtis stopped waving at anyone, not just Marlon. He walked around tight-jawed, like he was still holding a grudge he hadn't earned the right to carry, but not everyone stayed in his corner. At the next monthly HOA meeting, the room was packed, not because of a pool renovation or a holiday plan, but because folks had questions. Marlon came too, not to gloat, not to argue, just to listen. Halfway through the meeting, Amanda raised her hand. "I think it's time we stop pretending this is about rules," she said calmly. "It's about who we decide the rules apply to." Curtis shuffled papers. "We're not here to discuss past incidents." "But we should," Walter chimed in from the back, "because those incidents are the reason this board is losing the community's trust." A younger resident, Jordan Tran, nodded. "You all fined one man for something half of us have done. No warning, no conversation. You embarrassed him publicly, and now you want access to the lake like nothing happened?" Curtis rubbed his temple. "We made a mistake." Marlon stood. "You didn't just make a mistake. You weaponized your authority. You created rules out of thin air, enforced them selectively, and then when you got caught, you tried to paint me as the unreasonable one." He didn't yell, didn't even raise his voice. He just spoke plainly. "I bought that lake because I was tired of asking for the same basic respect everybody else gets by default. And now I have it. But what I really want is to never have to use a deed as armor again." The room went still. Desiree was in the back. She gave him a look that said she was proud. Not because he won, but because he never let it make him bitter. Curtis sighed, finally meeting Marlon's eyes. "You're right. We were wrong." He didn't apologize. Not really. But for Curtis, even those words were a stretch. The HOA sent out a formal email the next day acknowledging the overreach and announcing that the citation had been withdrawn from all records. No apology, but it was something. The next weekend, Marlon walked by the lake with his son. The boy pointed to a family setting up a picnic on the far end and asked, "Are they allowed to be here now?" Marlon smiled. "Yeah, I gave him permission." His son grinned. "You like being the boss?" Marlon chuckled. "Not really. But I like knowing I don't have to keep quiet to be respected." But even after the meetings and the emails, Marlon knew this story wasn't just about a lake. It was about drawing a line where silence used to be. Marlon never wanted to be the center of attention. He wasn't looking for a fight, and he sure wasn't trying to be the neighborhood's moral compass. All he wanted on that first Saturday afternoon was to fish in peace, to enjoy a few quiet hours by the water. That was it. But life has a way of putting you in positions you didn't ask for. He could have ignored the fine, paid it, shrugged it off like so many others before him had, but he didn't. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he wanted fairness, respect, a reminder to the people who needed it that being calm and quiet doesn't mean being weak, that just because someone doesn't raise their voice doesn't mean they'll let you walk over them. And in the end, the lake became more than a body of water. It became a mirror. It showed the neighborhood who they really were. Some didn't like what they saw. Others faced it and changed. A few months after everything settled, Marlon opened access to the lake again, but on his terms. He set up a simple online form. No crazy rules, just respect. Clean up after yourself. Treat people like neighbors, not trespassers. That's it. Surprisingly, the lake became more popular than ever. More diverse, more alive. The same board members who once tried to push him out now sent him thank you notes, thinly veiled, of course. But Marlon didn't need the words. He had already made his point. Desiree once told him, "You turned a slap in the face into a handshake." He liked that. Because real change? It doesn't always come from shouting the loudest. Sometimes it comes from doing what no one expects, like buying a lake. So here's the takeaway. If you've ever been singled out, ignored, pushed aside, or told in 100 small ways that you don't belong, you do. You don't have to yell to prove it. You don't have to play dirty. You just have to stand firm, speak up, and move smart. Let people talk. Let them doubt you. Then do what Marlon did. Show them your silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. If this story moved you, take a second to think about the silent battles happening around you. Speak up. Support your neighbors. Question what's normal if it only works for a few. And if someone tells you you can't fish, maybe it's time to buy the lake.